What a lot of people get wrong about negative thinking is they think that negative thinking is always bad. They think you should just be positive. Just think positively. You know what your problem is? You need to be more positive. I don't know about you, but if people tell me to be positive, I don't want to be positive. In fact, if someone says to me, smile, I think to myself, I'll smile when you get out of my face. It's like a contest sometimes in the self-help world. Look how happy I am. Meanwhile, their soul could be dying inside. It's actually more important to get people to stop being pessimistic than it is to get people to be optimistic. In this particular episode of the Changing Minds podcast, I'm going to walk you through some of the most empowering strategies that you can learn to be able to turn your thinking around, turn the smile and turn it into a frown. No, sorry, it's turning the frown into a smile. Either way, by the end of this episode, you'll walk away with clever tools. You'll understand some of the distortions and why we fall into the thinking traps that we do, why we find ourselves thinking negatively as is, and how we can start to think more positively but more usefully, and when it's appropriate to think more negatively as well. So you're going to find a whole host of tools. Really excited. Let's get into it. So in this episode, I want to walk you through why do we think negatively in the first place? I want to explain a little bit about negative thinking itself. I want to explore why is it we need to stop it? What damage does it inflict upon our bodies, upon our minds? What are the consequences of it? Why it happens in the first place? Why it's important for us to think negatively sometimes? We're also going to look at then how we think negatively, and I'll break down for you some of the distortions, what we call cognitive distortions. And this is really taken from the field of cognitive behavioral therapy. But finally, we will bring it up to an incredible crescendo where we're going to be looking at, well, what can you do about it? As you know, I'm all about strategies and walking you through exactly what you can do to think more positively. So we're going to finish with that. If you want to skip ahead to that, you can. But why? You might be missing on really, really great stuff the next few minutes. And you'll think to yourself, oh, it's fine, I'll just skip to it. I'm telling you, I'm going to cover really amazing things, and some of it'll be surprising. You'll be like, oh, really? And you don't want to miss that, do you? Anyway, I want to talk about thinking negatively. I don't just want to go, okay, everyone, the key is you need to be positive because positive thinking is good for you. And being positive means saying good things to yourself and blah, 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 blah. Because you've heard that a million times. In fact, most of the self-help books of the early 20th century, even the late 19th century, to be honest, all were emphasizing the importance of your thinking. From the books in the 1920s and 30s, such as Think and Grow Rich, to How to Win Friends and Influence People, right away to the middle of the century, The Power of Positive Thinking by Norman Vincent Peale. A large portion of the books that we have consumed over the entire history of personal and professional development have all been around, you need to think better. Think and grow rich. You need to be able to inspire yourself more. Be more positive. Look in the mirror and say positive things to yourself. You can do it. You're amazing. You're wonderful. You're superb. Even when you're not. And the trouble with that is it just doesn't work. Now, I know some people might say to me, well, Owen, I like to correct you there, but I used to be very negative. And I looked at myself in the mirror and I said to myself every single day, in every single way, I'm getting better and better. I gave myself what we call an auto-suggestion. And if you did, super. However, for most people, it's not enough. And the reason it's not enough is simply because we don't believe in it. So to start off with, let's look at, well, why is it important for us to stop thinking negatively? Why shouldn't we be allowed to think negatively, right? I remember once I was talking to my uncle. My uncle's very sort of straight, very straight sort of sense of humor, very funny. But he's one of these people that he comes out with one-liners all the time. And one of the things I said to him was, it's important to make every second count. I'm like into this all inspirational. You should make every second count. And he goes, why? He said, why can't you just let them go by? And I couldn't answer him because he was right. Because while I say, make every second count, you can do it. Fine, that's great. But at the same time, you don't have to. Oliver Burkeman wrote a great book where he talks about time management, and it's a really sort of counterintuitive take on time management where he looks at it and goes, look, you can't get everything done. And it's about changing your expectations and learning to be able to be okay with the fact that you will almost always have invariably a to-do list that is not fully finished. So when we answer the question why we need to stop thinking negatively, we have to be able to recognize the impact that negative thinking can have on us. And one of the most interesting bits of research comes from Michael F. Shire and colleagues. In 2021, they did a study where they found that from an impact perspective, it's actually more important to get people to stop being pessimistic than it is to get people to be optimistic. And I love this. I find it fascinating. But what they found is that pessimism itself, in other words, thinking everything's going to go badly, is bad for us. But it's not as much that optimistic thinking everything is going to go great, is always going to be very beneficial to us. And it's not that optimism isn't more powerful or more useful than pessimism. It's that a large part of it is don't be pessimistic. Avoid falling into the trap of thinking negatively. A lot of the research out there as well talks about like negative thoughts and negative emotions. I was listening to Professor Adam Grant on a podcast, and he quoted research by Maya Tamir. And the research that they were looking at was basically considering how we think about the negative feelings we feel. And the hypothesis that she noticed was that when people judge their negative emotions negatively, so when people think bad thoughts about the fact that they feel bad, that often can make things worse. It leads to worse from a well-being score perspective. It means that it impacts them negatively. Now, the research out there shows that a lot of times when we are thinking negatively, it has negative implications upon our health. Heart disease, again, probably along the lines of being impacted by things like chemical cortisol, which is fine on a regular basis. We all experience it. Early in the morning, for example, it's a normal part of life. Whenever we're watching a movie and something goes wrong in the movie, it happens. But when constantly our brains are releasing cortisol through a system and it becomes something that's chronic, it's something that's constantly happening, that's when it then has negative impacts. And when you're thinking negatively, a lot of times you're cultivating that kind of internal chemistry on an ongoing basis. And so what we need to be able to do is to be able to recognize that this can have a negative impact on our health. It's been linked to not only things like heart disease and whatnot, it's been linked to cognitive decline and even some preludes to Alzheimer's. It's been linked, obviously, it's a big precursor to depression and anxiety and stress and worrying and fear and all of the negative experiences we have. A large part of them come about as a result of our negative thinking. Now, in a previous episode, we talked about the inner voice, and I offered you lots of suggestions, strategies to help improve that. But today I want to talk specifically about this notion of being negative, because the idea is that so often we think that it's almost like we feel obliged to be positive. And we feel that being negative is a bad thing in and of itself. And I think that's part of the problem, because what we need to do is realize that once you understand a bit more about why you feel negatively, why you think negatively rather, that will then help you to understand why it sometimes can benefit you. So why do we think negatively? Well, the first thing is to understand that our brains are wired based upon a bias we have called negativity bias. And the negativity bias has come about since, in order to survive back in the hunter-gatherer days, we had to be great at noticing when there's threats. Your brain is a prediction machine. It figures out what it needs to do next. But one of its great skills is threat detection. And so it detects a threat in the environment. A part of your brain called the amygdala. It's not just, a lot of times the amygdala is just associated with fear and whatnot. It's not just about that. The amygdala senses when things are new. And it's different parts of it, different neurons inside of it will respond differently based upon if that new object, new experience, new event is a positive one, right? It could be reward, or is a dangerous one, threat. But either way, the amygdala notices when something new happens and figures out whether or not it's important, whether or not it's important from a positive perspective or a negative perspective. But whenever we experience any form of threat, we have to be able to pay attention to it, and we have to be able to figure out, how do we survive this? How do we get out of it? Therefore, our brains are oriented towards negative thinking. And it's not that they're oriented towards always thinking negatively, it's that they're always ready to figure out what might be wrong. So as a result of that, some brains more than others, but we tend to find ourselves erring on the side of, what if everything goes wrong? And sometimes we could be extra negative. The negativity that we're experiencing, that is a form of threat detection. We are detecting any possible threats, because when we're negative, we're thinking of everything that can go wrong, might be going wrong, might have gone wrong that we didn't see. We're noticing the threats in our environment. Another function of why we think negative, or at least another theory as to why we think negatively, is because so often if we expect something positive to happen and then it doesn't, our brains then have a big sort of depletion in terms of the amount of dopamine. Dopamine is a neurochemical that we experience in our brain. It's connected to reward and connected to learning and connected most of all to motivation and driving us forward. And whenever we experience something that surprises us in a positive way and it exceeds our expectations, we have a massive burst of dopamine. Whenever we experience something that we expect is going to go well, but it doesn't go well, then we experience the opposite of that. We have less dopamine than our default amount of dopamine. So your brain's constantly releasing a certain amount of dopamine. When we're surprised positively, lots of dopamine. When we're surprised negatively, as in something isn't as good as we thought it would be, we actually feel disappointed. And that lacking of motivation, that low motivation, that feeling of disappointment, tends to feel quite bad. So one way of negative thinking is if you're always thinking negatively, you can't be disappointed. If you believe you're useless and everything's going to go wrong, well, if it doesn't go totally wrong and if you're not found to be completely useless, it's a great day. And actually, that can be sometimes fun. Like you can literally go through your life and you can just go, okay, I'm just going to imagine the worst possible day happening. You can literally sit there and instead of doing The Secret, where you open up the book, The Secret, and you go, okay, I'm going to attract $1 million. Okay, I'm going to attract this amazing person into my life. Oh yeah, just imagine it. And then you open your eyes and it's not happening. Instead, try this one. You sit down on your couch. Don't go out yet in the day. Sit down on your couch and you know what you do then? You stop and you think to yourself, okay, what if everything goes wrong? What if this day goes dreadfully bad? What if everything, the worst possible thing that I can imagine happens over and over again? And then you do that, you visualize it, you imagine it, you feel miserable, and then you go out for your day. And what'll happen is you go, all these bad things didn't happen. My life is not nearly as bad as I imagined it. And therefore, you feel delighted. You actually have that nice, positive drive, that burst of dopamine in your system. Now, you might be saying to yourself, oh, and so let me get this straight. You're suggesting that we sit down, close our eyes, and imagine our day going awfully, so that as we go through, whenever bad things happen, we go, well, at least it's not as bad as when I was imagining it. And I was being kind of facetious, right? I'm not suggesting that is a great strategy, right? It's not the best idea for you to be able to engage in. But I am suggesting that if you do want to be effective, we need to recognize, as Dr. Richard Bandler, the co-creative genius of NLP and a great mentor and co-author of mine, says that disappointment requires adequate planning. You have to know ahead of time in order to be disappointed. So negative thinking, one of the functions is it allows us to be able to lower expectations. And again, I want to introduce you to the reasoning behind why negative thinking does what it does, so that we can understand why we need to handle it differently or deal with it differently. The next benefit of negative thinking is it allows us to learn from mistakes. If you're thinking negatively about, let's say, for example, I go out and I do a keynote speech and I'm doing it in front of a few hundred people and I come off afterwards and I think to myself about the mistakes I made. Well, on the one hand, you might say, oh, you're being very negative. Why are you doing that? But on the other hand, it teaches me. By focusing on the mistakes I make, it means I can learn from it. I can get better as a result. And equally too, it motivates me. By me feeling bad about the fact that I didn't do as well as I wanted to, that then motivates me and drives me to want to keep getting better, to want to keep growing, to want to keep improving, to want to keep moving forward. When we think things are going to go a certain way, it means that we're thinking through all the things that could go wrong so we can prepare ourselves, so we can get ready for them and know how we're going to handle them when they occur. And also negative thinking can also help us bond with others. The truth of the matter is that I don't know about you, but I don't like being around people that are always super positive. I like it. I prefer it to being with people that are super negative, but sometimes it's exhausting. And people are like, how are you? Amazing. Everything's so wonderful. Everything's great. Everything is this. And like, you're going, are you in the same world as me? Did you ever see the news? Do you know what's going on? But one of the things about most people is that they'll be very positive in a lot of ways, but they'll also be honest and authentic and real and vulnerable about the kind of stuff that they're going through. And so we bond with others by being able to recognize the negative side of life, the hard times, the challenges, and understanding not everything is perfect. And I think in the corporate world, sometimes we make the mistake because we have what Robert McKee, wonderful screenwriting guru and story genius, what he says is people a lot of times in the corporate world have negaphobia. They have a phobia of anything negative, so they avoid the negatives. And so often I've sat in a room talking to different stakeholders that I'm working with. And a lot of times they're very much, well, we don't want to talk about anything negative. We don't want to sell with any negativity. But negativity is one of the most important sides of any motivation. When you're trying to motivate someone to buy, you can't just rely on promising them all the great benefits that they'll get if they buy the product. They also have to be motivated and driven by the pain they'll experience if they don't. And so pain and pleasure are equally valuable. And that's why, again, negativity can be useful. It's as a motivator. But in this case, negativity also allows us to bond with others as well. So the bonding piece and the bonding part is another function of negative thinking. So that brings us to, well, what are the ways in which we do think negatively? And for this, I really want to touch on some of the what we call cognitive distortions that we have whenever we're pessimistic, whenever we're experiencing depression, whenever we're in a sort of a funk and we're thinking in a way that is not advantageous to us. What are some of these distortions, these biases we have in our brain that cause us to think negatively? And this comes more from cognitive behavioral therapy. I did an episode a few seasons ago on CBT. It's one of the most popular episodes that we've ever done. So if you want to know more about cognitive behavioral therapy, check out that episode. I'll leave it in the show notes. But for now, let's talk about some of these distortions. And we'll talk about the all or nothing frame of thinking, first of all. One of the things that a lot of people will experience, or a lot of people will do whenever they're thinking about problems, is they'll have it like an all or nothing. Either it's perfect or it's not. And this all or nothing frame means that we start to blow things out of proportion and we start to obsess about the negative things that are happening, and perfectionism and the anxiety that comes, or the stress that comes, or the self-criticism that comes with perfectionism comes largely because of this all or nothing thinking. Either I get everything perfect or I'm a piece of crap. And if it's a choice between that, then more often than not, we're invariably going to make mistakes. So what we need to do with the all or nothing thinking is to recognize that every time we fall into the trap of this black and white perspective of the world, we need to realize that most of the time the world is gray and it's rarely all or nothing. And by understanding that, it means when we notice ourselves using these big sort of generalizations, we can catch ourselves out. The next sort of approach, or the next sort of distortion rather, that interferes with our ability to think positively and causes us to think negatively is overgeneralizing. It's when we say every single day, I struggle with this. I'm always a mess. This never works out for me. I'll never meet anyone. I'm always making the same mistakes. Now, overgeneralizing is something where we generalize out of everything that could be happening. We create a generalization of our entire world. Now, in NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, we also have the notion of generalization. We have three things that we tend to do in our thinking. We delete information, we distort information, and we generalize information. And one of the best questions and tools that we can use from an NLP perspective is when we challenge this sort of generalization, or universal quantifier, as we call it, and we do so by repeating it. So if a person says to themselves, I'll never amount to anything, the response could be never. And you could do this to yourself. You can say, I'll never amount to anything. Never. I'll never amount to anything. I'm always messing this up. You're always messing this up. This will never work out. This will never work out. Everybody hates me. Everybody hates you. When you repeat it with upward inflection, you repeat that word, it's a great way to challenge overgeneralizing, which is, again, another distortion that we have. Third distortion is something that a lot of people struggle with, which is catastrophizing. This is when you create the worst case scenario, right? So someone doesn't respond to your email straight away, and you're thinking, why aren't they responding? Normally they respond. I don't know why they're not responding. Do they hate me? Did I say something wrong? Should I put that extra full stop? I don't think I said thanks at the end of my email. What if they don't like the fact that I said thanks? What are they thinking about? Blah, 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 blah. Before you know it, you're out in the street. You don't have a place to live. You're probably coked up out of your head, and now you can't even afford cocaine. You're probably on some like heroin. You're in a really bad place, in a really bad state. And you are in that position. Why? All because you didn't put that extra full stop and you forgot to say thanks. Now, I know it seems ridiculous, doesn't it? But be honest. Do you ever catastrophize? Do you ever imagine that you'll never hear from someone again just because you haven't heard from them in the last few minutes? Happens, right? We do it. I do it myself. And you know what it's worse is, have you ever woken up at like 4 o'clock in the morning and randomly you think about something you haven't thought about in 2 years, and all of a sudden you start to think, what if? And as soon as you say that what if, you create a horror movie worse than Stephen King. You catastrophize the hell out of it. And before you know it, An hour goes by and you're like lying in bed, looking at the wall, looking at the ceiling, going, I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know what I'm going to do. Then finally you drift off back to sleep. You wake up the next day and you go, you make that sort of sound probably because, you might have like a nasal infection or something. But you're thinking to yourself, that was stupid. Because you realize in the light of day, as they call it, that the catastrophizing wasn't in any way realistic. Sometimes, though, it doesn't happen at night. Sometimes it happens during the day and it feels realistic. So what we need to do is ask ourselves the question, is this really likely to happen? What's the percentage chance of this happening? Do I expect it to happen? We need to recognize when we're catastrophizing and understand there's a difference between freaking out and overdoing it and imagining the worst case scenario and actually thinking intelligently about what's most likely to happen in the future. The next one is maximizing, and that's really maximizing whatever problem is happening. So you really blow things out of proportion. You go, oh my goodness, this is the worst thing ever. I can't believe this is happening. Oh my goodness, this is dreadful. You take something small and you blow it so big that it becomes catastrophic. A little bit like catastrophizing. But this is when you, for example, you think about a mistake that you made and you make a bigger deal about it than it is. Oh, this means I'm useless. I knew it. I'm no good, even though it was a small mistake. So this is maximizing. And then you've got discounting or disqualifying or discounting the positive. It's kind of like minimizing. It's when you do something positive and someone says to you, oh, and you saved my life. And I go, no, I didn't really. I mean, your life was going to be saved anyway. I mean, you know what I mean? You probably wouldn't have done it. Or, I love your book. Your book was great. Well, it was an okay book. I mean, I was going to write a book anyway, and blah, 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 blah. You won the Super Bowl. Oh, well, like they threw it into my hands. I caught it. I didn't know what to do. Blah, 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 blah. The point being that oftentimes we can discount the positive things that we do, and we don't really focus on them that much. Another thing we can do is label ourselves and categorize ourselves, call ourselves certain things with certain adjectives that we lock onto, which negatively impacts our identity. We can also personalize, where we take something personally. So someone does something, we go, I know it, it's about me, isn't it? It's because I'm useless. And like, no, it's just because of this. And they're like, no, it's because of me. I'm never any good at anything. You can start to go through that whole story. And there's also should, right? We say, I should do this. I should have done that. I should have done the other. And so we feel guilt. We feel shame. We feel terrible about ourselves as a result of using that term should over and over again. And then the other thing that we do is emotional reasoning. This is when we actively confuse the difference between something being true and something feeling true. So when you're in a really bad mood, you can start to feel like everything's going wrong, and you feel like people don't like you, and you feel like this is terrible, and you feel like things are never going to work. But you're just feeling it. It's not a fact, it's a feeling. And you have to be able to distinguish the difference between a fact and a feeling, because once you understand the difference between a fact and a feeling, it puts you in a much better position to be able to take control. Now, what a lot of people get wrong about negative thinking is they think that negative thinking is always bad. They think you should just be positive. Just think positively. You know what your problem is? You need to be more positive. Positive, positive, positive. Imagine it working out. Isn't that great? Yeah, you can do it. I don't know about you, but if people tell me to be positive, I don't want to be positive. In fact, if someone says to me, smile, I think to myself, I'll smile when you get out of my face. I don't like it. I don't like when people tell me to be positive. And the reason I don't like it is because they glorify this as if it's a badge of honor. I'm more positive than you. It's like a contest sometimes in the self-help world. Look how happy I am. Ask me how I am. I'm amazing. I'm awesome. I'm going for all these superlatives to tell you how amazing and happy I am. Meanwhile, their soul could be dying inside. Now, maybe this is more I've got a bad attitude about it. And if so, what am I going to do? But what I do believe is that there is a time to be negative. And there is a reason why sometimes negative thinking can help us. The problem is when we always find ourselves thinking negatively, or even when we most of the time think negatively, because that hampers our ability to be successful. When you're negative, it limits your ability to take action. You think it's not going to work out, so you don't even bother trying. You think you're going to fail, therefore you don't even give it a go. You feel bad about something that happened, and therefore you keep beating yourselves up over and over again, and you make the inside of your mind a horrible place to be. That's problematic. But when you use negative thinking to figure out what might go wrong, and let me imagine, if this goes wrong, what am I going to do? When you actively use it effectively as a threat detector, But then you stop, you figure out a plan, you make sure you're protected, and then you think positive. That can be wonderful. When you use it to motivate yourself, Jim Rohn gives a great example, the motivational speaker Jim Rohn, wonderful example. He goes, one of the most important emotions you could ever feel is disgust. I remember hearing that. I loved it. I loved it. Disgust. Everyone's like, be motivated. Imagine how great things are. Go over how amazing your life will be. Disgust. Why is disgust so good? It's because the more disgusted you are with your life, the more motivated you are to change it. You're disgusted. I don't want to experience this anymore. And as a result, what happens? You find yourself needing to change. Disgust becomes a tool that drives you forward and allows you to make incredible changes. So sometimes thinking negatively can be good, and you need to figure out when is that time. When is it useful for you to be thinking negatively? Another misconception people have is suppressing it works. There's a great musical, a Book of Mormon, whereby they have this wonderful sort of satirical song where they said, switch it off. It's like if you ever have negative thoughts and whatever, switch it off like a light switch. Just go click and you won't be thinking it anymore. And the reality is, as we all know, is that if you try to suppress negative thinking, it will come back and bite you. In fact, the more you try not to think negatively, the more likely you are to think negatively. So we can't use that as an effective strategy. You don't try to bulldoze your negative thinking by going, okay, I'm just going to be positive, because the negative thinking will pounce on you when you least expect it, constantly reminding you, hey, I'm protecting you. I'm just protecting you. I'm just making sure you don't make a fool of yourself. I'm just making sure you know what dangers lurk around the corner. So in order for us to do this, what are the strategies we need to use to be less negative? The first one is becoming aware of our negative thinking, noticing when we're thinking negatively, and understanding whether or not that negative thinking is going to be useful at that moment in time. So it means tracking and noticing, what am I thinking right now? What am I saying to myself? What am I imagining? What am I visualizing in my mind? Once you identify that, once you identify and be aware of what you're thinking, the next step is to look for the evidence. What evidence do you have that backs it up? Right. There's one of the questions that Byron Katie asks. Byron Katie, phenomenal author, and she uses a thing called The Work, and in it, there's sort of 4 questions. And one of them is it accurate? Your thinking, your thought, your belief, is it accurate? So when we're talking about negative thinking, is it accurate? What's your evidence? I'm so useless. Okay, cool. What's your evidence that you're useless? Well, I made a mistake. Okay, but how does that mean you're useless? Well, see, you can't do it. Whenever you're asked for evidence to back up your negative thinking, your negative thinking is your negative thinker, whoever they might be, right? Whatever the voice inside your head is that's quite negative, and usually it's a collection of voices. But they don't have their due diligence done. They don't have their research. They don't have research papers going, Owen, let me just tell you, you're useless, and I've got all of these research papers. So first exhibit is, remember that time you walked into the wall? Well, that's an indication that you're an idiot, right? That's the first thing. That was done in 2017, I think. Then there's another example, Owen, where you said this dumb thing. Let me just remind you of this one, right? Your brain isn't that smart. It's not going to go to all the trouble. Most of the time, the negative thinking party is lazy. It doesn't do its research. It goes out on a limb and it goes, you're useless, you're pathetic, you're awful. And if you go, oh, all right, cool, where's the evidence? It goes, well, this. Maybe it'll give you 2 examples. And you go, you understand how old I am. You understand you're talking about 2 micro examples, and you're using that to prove that I'm all of these negative things you say I am. Makes no sense. So you look for evidence is a really good one. Another one is you go, what else could it mean? So it's like, oh, they don't like me anymore. Okay. What else is possible by the fact that they haven't called you back yet? And there's going to be at least 2 or 3, if not 4 or 5 or 6 different alternatives. What you want to do is you want to find a plethora of different types of alternatives. And then what I like to do is I go and I give all of them a percentage of likelihood. I go, how likely do I think it is that they hate me? How likely do I think it is that this is about them? How likely do I think it is that they forgot? How likely do I think it is that they're overwhelmed and they haven't got a chance to call me back? How likely do I think it is that they think that they don't need to contact me because I've said everything there is to? Like, There's a million different alternative explanations. What I like to do is I like to write them out. If I'm really thinking negatively about something, I write them out and I go, okay, what's most likely? I give them all a percentage. It's kind of a nerdy way to do it now that I'm talking about it out loud. But I give them all a percentage. And invariably, guess what? You know, the negative one never gets the highest percentage. You know why? Because it's not the most likely scenario most of the time. You know what I'm saying? Look for the evidence. And then when you can't find that much evidence and it's kind of sketch and you're trying to go, really? Then you go, what are some alternatives? And more often than not, you can find more evidence to suggest the alternatives are true. The next thing you can do is practice gratitude. Now, I know what you're thinking to yourself. You're thinking, oh yeah, Owen, practice gratitude. Well, number one, yeah, I am saying that. Number two, gratitude has been shown psychologically from the research to be one of the most useful and most powerful ways to change the way we think. If you want to become less pessimistic, gratitude is your best friend. It's one of the best tools, techniques you can use. What do we mean by being grateful or demonstrating gratitude? Gratitude journaling. Every morning, spend 3 to 5 minutes thinking about 3 specific things in your life that you feel grateful for. Generally speaking, when you do it about people, it tends to be better. And you don't just go, I'm grateful for my life, I'm grateful for my friends, I'm grateful for my... Pick a specific person and pick a specific thing they do that makes you feel grateful, or some quality about them that makes you feel grateful. And when you're specific about it, and when you're consistent with it, you're training your brain to look at all the things you have to feel good at, all the things that fulfill you in life, as opposed to everything that you lack, which is where your negative thinking goes. And Brené Brown talks about this. Brené Brown is a wonderful author, an expert, and I think she was citing someone or quoting someone talking about how we go to sleep at night, and before we go to bed, we think to ourselves, I didn't get enough done. And then when we wake up, we think to ourselves, I didn't sleep well enough. And it's constantly not being enough over and over again. And that's because we're on this negative thinking train. But once you start to get to the point where you focus on practicing gratitude and gratefulness, it turns the train around and it goes back to the future, right? Just like Doc Brown did, or actually Marty McFly did in Back to the Future 3. He got on the train and Doc, of course, spoiler alert, went off because Clara climbed onto the train. And Doc turned around and saw Clara and said, oh, I have to be with her. So he got the hoverboard and managed to save Clara. Do you remember that? Bet you remember that. By the way, in my bookcase, if you see, there's a little yellow box. It's kind of blurred, but you can sort of see in the background. That's a small case of plutonium. It's not real plutonium, right? But it's plutonium that Doc Brown used in order to travel back in. Anyway, it is really important to demonstrate gratitude to ensure that you're practicing that on an ongoing basis as a strategy. Another great technique is to identify as an optimist. Be the kind of person that's optimistic. When you see yourself as an optimistic person, simply labeling yourself in that way and thinking of yourself in that way transforms your behavior. There's 2 ways to change your identity. One is inside out and the other is outside in. Inside out means you change the beliefs you have about yourself, such as choosing to see yourself as an optimist, choosing to focus this. But the other way is outside in, where you act as if you're that person and then you start to become that person. And so do both. Call yourself an optimist, but at the same time, practice optimism. How do you practice optimism? Imagine things working out. Ask yourself questions which focus your attention on how could things work out? What if everything went great? What if everything went well? What if this worked out exactly the way I wanted to? Wouldn't that be nice? Wouldn't it be nice? Can't even make up the lyrics because I don't know the lyrics of the song. Beach Boys, right? Great song. Was that the Beach Boys? I think it was the Beach Boys. Yeah. Wouldn't it be nice? Fantastic. Again, I'm hoping that this is not going to be a copyright problem. Brian Wilson, if you or any other member of the Beach Boys is listening, I'm sorry. The next strategy is index your language. This means you're aware of and noticing what language you're using. There's a great book. Well, I'll be honest, it is a great book. It's just hard going. It's called Science and Sanity. It was written in the 1930s by Alfred Korzybski. It's basically a book that describes a field called general semantics. And the notion of this book is really about the way in which we establish or consider things or build beliefs and build knowledge and whatnot. Someone that was inspired by this was a guy called David Berlin. And he created this form of language in the 1960s, I want to say, called E prime. And E prime is English without the verb to be in it. So instead of you saying to yourself, I am useless, you would have to say, I seem useless to me. Or instead of saying, this is a terrible meal, this seems like a terrible meal to me, or I feel that this is a terrible meal to me. And the reason I bring that up is what Korzybski said in Science and Sanity was that we can be more sane and communicate more scientifically when we're more accurate with our language, when we index our language. And indexing your language in this context would mean instead of saying this is terrible, instead we say this feels terrible to me right now. So we index it with giving ourselves a timestamp. So right now this is terrible. And it feels terrible or seems terrible as opposed to is terrible. And the beauty is if something seems that way, you're reminding yourself that it's just your perspective. If something is that way, it is that way. But if something seems that way or feels that way, you know it's a feeling or you know it's a perspective. And if it's a feeling or perspective, guess what? You can change it. If it's something that's happening like in general, this is terrible, well, it's terrible forever. But if it's this seems terrible to me, right? It's my perspective. Right now, it means temporarily it's only a problem. So simply indexing your language like that, try it when you're thinking some negative thought, try to simply index it. Try to make it so that you put it in the now. So this will never work out. Changes to, I feel that this might not work out right now. And all of a sudden it feels different. Your brain is less likely to resist it because you're still saying the same thing. You're just being more accurate with language. Since your brain doesn't have a massive amount of evidence to back up the negative thoughts, it's more likely to acquiesce to your demands in that context. See that word, acquiesce? Pretty fancy word, if you ask me. Bet you didn't think you were going to learn some extra vocabulary. I'm sure most of you are listening going, I know what acquiesce means, mate. I don't know why you're talking about it like you're impressed with acquiesce. You're pathetic, Owen. You're pathetic. See, that's me thinking negatively. And there is a time that you need to think negatively. And that's the next technique. You need to recognize, is thinking negatively going to help me today? Is thinking negatively a good thing? Is this going to motivate me? Is this going to help me learn? Is this going to help me grow? Do I need to pay attention to possible threats? And if it is, if it does, if it can, great. Negative think away. But again, give yourself a limit. Think negatively so that it does what it needs to do and then move to the positive thought. Imagine things working out. Figure out how great would it be if things worked out the way I wanted it to. By you knowing when to think negatively and when to be positive, which be positive most of the time, but there are times to think negatively, it'll really help you. And the final technique is to recognize the consequences. What are the consequences of my negative thoughts? If I keep thinking negatively about this, what's that going to lead to? And all you got to do is you got to stop and go, if I keep thinking negatively in this way about this, what's the likely scenario? If I change my thinking and I start being more positive about it, what's the likely scenario? When you do that, guess what? You realize that the consequences of thinking negatively are a lot worse than the consequences of thinking positively. Ergo, that's another fancy word. I know that makes me sound like an idiot. But therefore, you decide that you're going to think more positively moving forward. It's wonderful. You just identify the consequences. So, begs the final question, what impact will this have? Well, to me, the more that we can start to think better inside our head, the more we can, as I describe it, to believe better, the more we are creating a beautiful place inside our mind. And the more people that walk around thinking better and believing better, the more that they can act better and behave better and make more of a positive difference to the world. And then we will create world peace. We will solve all the problems of humanity. And one day we will walk on the moon again. I believe we're going to walk on the moon 2025, I want to say. So if you're watching this late and it's like after 2025 and we haven't walked on the moon, try not to think too negatively about it. There's obviously good reasons for it. But we can do amazing things. And I'm saying, I know, world peace, okay, right? I'd like to see that happen. But it doesn't mean we can't believe. And it doesn't mean we can't try. And it doesn't mean we can't do what we can to make the inside of our head as good as possible so that at least we can live the best, happiest lives and create better, happier lives for those that we love and maybe, just maybe, make a positive difference into the universe. So I hope you found this useful. I hope you think positively about this episode and don't think too negatively about it. I hope you enjoyed it. And most of all, I hope you're able to find something useful from it. For now, take care, be well, spread the word, let people know. And by the way, if you wanted something to read got a great newsletter. It's owenfitzpatrick.com/newsletter. The wisdom in that. And it's actually on this week. It's on the same topic as this episode. It's out every Tuesday. So definitely recommending that one. owenfitzpatrick.com/newsletter. I don't want to say it's amazing, but you know. Anyway, take care, be well, believe better, and as always, may the force be with you all. Bye for now.